Everybody said Olivia Bennett was throwing her life away. And on the morning of her wedding, standing in a white dress worth more than most people's annual salary, she was starting to wonder if they were right, not because of the man she was marrying, but because of the man sitting in the front row with a glass of champagne and murder in his eyes. Her father, Richard Hargrove, founder and CEO of Hargrove Capital Group, one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, had not smiled once since the ceremony began. He sat rigid in his tailored suit, jaw tight, eyes cold, watching his only daughter walk toward a man he considered beneath her. Not a business mogul, not the heir to any dynasty. Just Daniel Carr, a high school teacher from a small town in Ohio who drove a 2012 Honda Civic and packed his own lunch to work every day. Olivia had met Daniel 3 years earlier at a community literacy drive she had attended mostly out of boredom. He had been teaching a group of teenagers how to read financial newspapers, making them laugh while learning, and something in her chest had shifted permanently that afternoon. She had dated men with private jets, men with penthouses, men whose names made stock prices move. None of them had ever made her feel the way Daniel did, like she was finally visible. But Richard Hargrove had a different vision for his daughter's future. He had already selected her match, Clifton Wells, the 42-year-old managing director of Wells Energy, a man with connections in 3 governments and a rumored seat on the board of a Swiss private equity firm. Clifton was polished, powerful, and completely incapable of genuine warmth. Olivia had gone on exactly 4 dinners with him and felt nothing except a mild, suffocating dread. She had told her father this, calmly at first, then firmly, then with tears, then with silence. He hadn't listened once. So when she walked down the aisle toward Daniel and saw the tears of joy in her husband's eyes, she made her decision with every step. This was right. This was hers. Then her father stood up. The wedding hall went quiet so fast it was almost violent. Over 300 guests froze. Glasses stopped midway to lips. Someone's baby, sensing the shift in the room, began to cry and was quickly hushed. Richard Hargrove raised his champagne glass slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the practiced authority of a man who had addressed boardrooms and broken deals with equal ease. "My daughter believes she is in love," he said, and his tone made love sound like a diagnosis. "She believes this man beside her can give her a life worth living. I have tried to protect her from this mistake. She has refused my counsel." He paused, letting the silence press down on every person in the room. "So let this be heard by everyone gathered here today. If Olivia proceeds with this marriage, she is no longer my daughter. She will receive nothing from me. No inheritance. No access to Hargrove Capital. No family support of any kind. From this moment, she is on her own." The gasp that rolled through the crowd was audible, like wind through dry grass. Olivia stood completely still. She felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers, not pulling her away, not panicking, just holding on, steady and warm, saying without words, "I'm here. Whatever you decide, I'm here." She turned to look at her father, and for the first time in her 27 years, she looked at him not as a daughter who needed his approval, but as a woman who had finally outgrown his fear. "Then I'll leave with nothing," she said clearly, and she meant every syllable. The wedding continued. Her father left before the cake was cut. The next morning, Olivia woke up in a modest hotel room beside her husband, with exactly $3,000 in her personal account, money she had saved quietly over the past year, almost as if some part of her had known this moment was coming. Her cards linked to her father's accounts were frozen before noon. Her driver had been recalled. Her apartment on the Upper East Side, registered under her father's company, had a new code on the gate by evening. She and Daniel moved into his 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet suburb of Columbus within the week. If you have ever watched this channel before, you already know we are just getting started, and things are about to get a lot more intense. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because this story is going to take turns you will not see coming. The first 3 months nearly broke her. Not because Daniel wasn't enough, he was extraordinary. He budgeted meticulously, never complained, cooked more nights than she did, and when she cried at 2 and once because she missed her mother who had died when she was 12 and who had no one now to defend her memory, he held her until she stopped without saying a single useless word. But the world around her was brutal. Former friends stopped returning her calls within weeks. The social invitations dried up. A woman she had known since high school posted a thinly veiled comment online about people who chose poverty for attention. Business contacts who had eagerly cultivated her acquaintance because of her surname suddenly became very busy. She applied for 7 jobs in her field, communications and brand strategy, and got 3 callbacks. 2 of those evaporated the moment they discovered she was no longer affiliated with Hargrove Capital. The third offered her a salary she accepted gratefully, even though it was less than what she used to spend monthly on facials. She started a small freelance consultancy from their second bedroom, working nights after her day job, building a client base from scratch, learning accounting because they couldn't afford to hire one, learning graphic design from tutorials on YouTube because professional designers were too expensive. Learning, learning, always learning. Daniel never once said, "I told you so," about any difficulty, but he also never let her quit. One evening, when she was ready to call her father and concede, Daniel sat across from her at their small kitchen table, looked her in the eyes and said, "Olivia, you are not going back to be controlled. You are going forward to be free. There is a difference and you know it." She closed her father's contact and went back to her laptop. By month 4, her consultancy had 3 paying clients. By month 5, she had 7. A profile piece in a mid-size business publication called her one of the most quietly effective brand strategists in the market. The piece was small, but it was hers. Then month 6 arrived, and the world turned upside down twice. The first turn was good. A New York-based media startup she had been working with received Series A funding and credited her strategy work publicly in their announcement. Her name began to circulate in rooms she had not entered. Her inbox filled with inquiries. Suddenly, being the daughter who walked away from billions was not a mark of shame, it was a story. It was a brand. It was power. The second turn was catastrophic, but it wasn't hers. Hargrove Capital Group, the empire her father had spent 30 years building, was imploding. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. A senior executive, Victor Aldridge, chief financial officer and one of her father's most trusted men, had been systematically looting the company for almost 2 years. Shell companies, falsified procurement records, diverted contracts. The fraud ran to over $400 million. When federal investigators moved in, 3 board members resigned within 48 hours. Institutional investors began pulling out. The stock value of publicly listed Hargrove subsidiaries dropped by 31% in a single week. Olivia read the news at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee in her hand and felt something complicated move through her. Not satisfaction, not sorrow exactly, but something heavy and unresolved, like a storm that had been predicted for years and still arrived with shocking force. What she also felt, quietly and privately, was this: she had warned him. 18 months ago, she had come to her father with concerns about Victor Aldridge. She had noticed irregularities in a procurement report she had been reviewing for a brand project. She had raised it carefully, professionally, with documentation. Her father had dismissed her in under 5 minutes. "Victor has been with me for 11 years. You are a brand manager, not a forensic accountant. Stay in your lane." She had stayed in her lane, and now the car had driven off a cliff without her in it. But here is what she did not expect, what nobody in that story expected. One Friday evening in late November, she was in the second bedroom, her office now, reviewing a client brief when Daniel appeared in the doorway with an expression she had never seen on his face. "Someone is here," he said carefully, "at the door." She came out to the sitting room. Standing just inside the front door, hat in hand, literally, physically. A man who had never held his own hat in his life was Richard Hargrove. His suit, always immaculate, was creased across the shoulders. His face, always composed and commanding, was exhausted in a way that went deeper than tiredness. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out and hadn't decided yet what to fill himself with. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he said, "Olivia." Just her name, just that. And in the way he said it, the catch at the end, the way the syllables cost him something, she heard the whole apology before it was spoken. "I was wrong," he said. He didn't look at Daniel when he said the next part, but his voice didn't falter. "About you, about him, about what I thought mattered," he exhaled slowly. "The company is in serious trouble. I have lawyers, I have consultants, and none of them understand what needs to happen publicly right now. The narrative is destroying us before the courts even rule. I need," and here he stopped because the word was difficult for a man like him, "I need your help." Olivia felt Daniel's hand rest briefly on her shoulder from behind, not guiding her, just reminding her he was there. She looked at her father for a long time. "Sit down," she said finally. "I'll make coffee." She did not say yes immediately. She asked questions, hard ones. She asked him what he thought he had done to her. She asked him to say it plainly, not in the language of business loss, but in the language of a father who had abandoned a daughter on the happiest day of her life. She made him sit in that discomfort without rescuing him from it. Daniel sat quietly nearby, not interfering but present. Her father answered every question. Slowly, haltingly, in a voice stripped of its corporate armor, he answered. And then she discovered something that changed everything. While her lawyers, yes, she had lawyers now, because success requires infrastructure, were reviewing documents her father had provided to help her understand the company's crisis, something surfaced that made her go very still at her desk for a full 3 minutes. The crisis was real. The fraud was real. Victor was real and terrible. But a separate set of documents, financial records from a holding account, revealed that her father had quietly transferred significant assets 6 months ago, assets that had not been touched by the fraud, assets that were protected, into a foundation in her name. He had done it the week after the wedding, the week he had cut her off. He had stripped her name from every public record of his life, yes. But he had also quietly, secretly, ensured she could not be destroyed. He had been terrified and prideful and wrong, but he had also never completely let go. She walked into the sitting room where he was waiting, and she put the documents on the table between them. "You want to tell me something?" she said. He looked at the papers for a long time. Then he looked up at her with something in his face she had not seen since she was a small girl sitting on his shoulders, something raw and unguarded and purely paternal. "I didn't know how to say I was sorry," he said. "So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I tried to make sure you were safe." She sat across from him. "That's not enough," she said, "but it's a start. If this story is keeping you riveted, you are not alone. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you have forgiven him? Like this video and subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because the final chapter is the one that will stay with you." Olivia helped. Not because she owed him, not because the money compelled her. She helped because she had spent 6 months learning that strength is not withholding. Strength is choosing clearly, deliberately, from a place of wholeness, what you are willing to give and what you are not. She ran the public communications strategy for Hargrove Capital Group's crisis response. She positioned the company not as a victim of fraud, but as an institution willing to be transparent, accountable, and reformed. She worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks. She pulled in 2 of her own clients who were media figures and used those relationships to shift the narrative. She was brilliant at it. She was, as it turned out, her father's daughter in every way that mattered, and none of the ways that had hurt her. The company stabilized. Federal investigations proceeded, but investor confidence began a slow recovery. Aldridge faced prosecution. The board was restructured. And then Olivia did the thing that would define her publicly for the next decade. She declined the executive role her father offered her within the company. She declined the ownership stake. She declined all of it graciously, clearly, without bitterness. Instead, she formalized the foundation her father had quietly established in her name and redirected its mandate entirely. The Carr-Hargrove Foundation, she insisted on her husband's name first, would fund young entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds with mentorship, seed capital, and brand strategy support. Daniel, for his part, stayed in his classroom. He said he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The students in his school would later write essays about him that were published in a national education journal. He was, by every measure, a man at peace. At the Foundation's launch event, Richard Hargrove sat in the audience, not on the stage, not at the high table, but in the audience, and watched his daughter command a room of 500 people with total authority. When she finished speaking, he stood up before anyone else and applauded, and there were tears on his face that he didn't bother to hide. Afterward, he found her near the catering table. "I spent 30 years building a company," he said quietly. She looked at him and waited. "You built something greater," he said. "You built a family, and you did it without a single thing from me." She took his hand. "I did it with everything you taught me," she said, "even the hard lessons." And there in that room, surrounded by the people she had chosen and the life she had constructed from absolute zero, Olivia Bennett, now Olivia Carr, in every room that mattered to her, understood something her father had taken 30 years and a near catastrophe to learn. Power is not what you accumulate. Power is what you choose to give away, and to whom and why. The teacher's wife had built an empire after all. It just looked nothing like her father's. And it was so much better. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest. Was it the wedding, the return, or the final choice? Subscribe for more stories that make you feel something real. And if you liked this one, the like button is waiting for you right now. See you in the next one.